So, all right, then there is DNS assisting in attacks. WannaCry ransomware, this was a infection that infected machines and took them down. This uses NSA-developed attacks. This is one of the more controversial things that the NSA did. The NSA hoarded vulnerabilities, which is apparently what China's trying to do by silencing Naomi Wu in other ways. And then they developed attacks, and then they didn't keep them secret. They let them get stolen by the Russians, and then the Russians leaked them, and they were used to make malware that infected machines. So that was a problem. And when that happened, Marcus Hutchins, he accidentally stopped it. And the reason he did is he performed a malware analysis technique. This guy, Marcus Hutchins, you can use basic malware analysis techniques to understand malware, and that's what he did. And you can look at the strings in the malware, and he saw a domain name in the malware. And he found, he tried to see if somebody who was using that domain, and nobody was using it, so he bought the domain, and that turned out to be the master kill switch to turn off the malware. So by his research and his action, the malware was stopped. So even though it froze up some hospitals in the UK, it did not freeze American hospitals or businesses because of the time zones. When the original attack hit the UK where he was, he stopped it before it became active in America. So he was regarded as a hero. And he came over to DEF CON to give talks, and after the talks, the FBI arrested him because years before this, he had written banking malware, apparently. And then he had people defending him, and he's still in the United States. He puts out a podcast. He's still greatly liked, and I think he got off of those charges after fighting for a few years. But now he's here. Maybe he's still fighting it all in court. I'm not really quite sure. I don't think he went to prison or anything, though, and I think the EFF defended him. All right, so anyway, that was DNS stopping an attack, just sort of incidentally. Just the presence of that domain was enough to turn off the malware. And most malware does communicate with certain domains, but it isn't that common that the presence of the domain is enough to simply turn it off. All right, another thing you can do is use dynamic DNS that lets you change the IP address of a domain name quickly. One reason people use this is because they have a dynamic DNS at home that keeps changing, and they want to run a server at home, so they use a forwarder from the internet called dynamic DNS to find the machine. You can also use it by other malicious people use it because they are posting illegal content on hacked servers, and they keep getting kicked off and moving to a different server, so they keep moving the domain name to point to the current location of the server that hasn't been turned off yet. There's also fast flux DNS that moves the server behind proxies that change rapidly just to hide the location of the central server. And then there's packet amplification. This started with the Smurf attack. In the early days, let me just get back to my command line here. Okay, so I can clear this. Okay, if you do ping, say www.ccsf, I got to spell it better, www.ccsf.edu. Okay, so it found this address, which is 54, which is actually a little strange. Let me try another one. I'm hoping to get a better answer than that. Let's try Hills. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, this is the older number system. I don't know why some stuff has moved to a different number system at City College. Okay, 147, 144, 12. Now, I can ping a local address, like 127.001, and that works. I can also ping a local broadcast address. This is called undirected broadcast. Yep, and notice I get multiple replies from different servers, from 135, from 209, from 233. This is how you send a broadcast ping that reaches all the machines on your local net, and they'll reply to a ping if they do reply to pings, which Macs and Unix machines do by default and Windows machines do not by default. So you can see I have 3 devices on my network right now, 233, 209, and 135. So by sending a broadcast ping, I find all the devices. Now, there was a time when you could do this. If I ping that City College server, this one here, 147, 144, 12, okay, that pings one server. That's a Class B address, so the Directed multicast is this. That would ping every server at City College. These are thrown away by the intermediate routers and you don't get any answers anymore. But there's a time when this kind of directed broadcast would go over the internet to the location of this network, which is City College, and then ping every device on the network, and all those replies would come back to you. Now, you saw on my local network, every one ping I sent out would give me 3 replies, because I apparently have 3 devices on my network right now. But in this case, you might have 1,000 or 10,000 devices that all respond to reply, and that was one of the early amplification attacks. An attacker would send requests to that broadcast address, which would then get a flood of devices to reply, and the attacker would forge the from address to be somebody else's address. Now, this target will get all those replies. So even if I can only send a small number of packets per second, the target will get hit by many times more packets per second. This amplifies the attack. And there's a whole series of protocols like this where a small request has a large reply, and I'm able to forge the from address. And those are things that lead to packet amplification attacks. And DNS, the original one was ping, but pretty soon people realized you can do it with DNS too, to hold distributed reflection and amplification denial of service. All I have to do is spend a small request with a big reply, and pretty much anything that goes over UDP is vulnerable to this redirection attack because UDP does not have a handshake. So I can send something with a from address, and there's no way to verify that that from address is accurate. It's just like postal mail. I can put a letter in the mailbox and put a fake from address on it, and they don't have any way to verify that. So if they try to return it to the sender, they might be returning it to the wrong sender, and they would never know. That's the heart of this. TCP-based protocols, you can't do this because you have to send a SYN and get a SYN ACK and then an ACK before you can send a request. And so you have to put in the right from address so you can perform the handshake. But UDP doesn't have any way to verify the from address. So if you do a dig any of yahoo.com, there's a lot of information that comes down. And that's just a big response to a small request. So if you look at it in Wireshark, the request is 69 bytes, the reply is 379 bytes, so that's 5.5 times as many bytes. So that's one level of amplification you could get just by doing these kind of requests. If you go to ietf.org, the Internet Engineering Task Force, then you'll get these DNS-SEC cryptographic signatures, and they are much bigger, so your request will now have 200 bytes or so. Request is 28 bytes and reply is 4183, so something like 45 times, but that goes over TCP, so you can't redirect it to a third party. So that's an amplification, but probably not as useful for that attack. Anyway, then there's something called extension DNS, which is intended to make it possible to send larger packets via UDP, and that's nice. This will make DNS-SEC more powerful, but it will also make DNS amplification attacks more powerful. All right, and by the way, the solution for all this is you should watch if people are sending a large flood of traffic into your servers and limit the amount of requests they can make per second. That's a best common practice to prevent this. Then there was a Trojan that used DNS as a conduit of attacks. So I think it used it as a command and control server. And then you can detect malicious activity on a network by monitoring DNS. One thing, machines that are infected by remote control software will often make a lot of queries. Spam relays will make a lot of requests to find mail servers. Botnets will make many DNS requests to exfiltrate traffic or other reasons. So Conficker, for example, would make up 50,000 new domains per day. All these could be the command and control servers to try to hide them, and so you'd see a lot of these requests. In any case, you can often tell infected machines because they just make a lot of DNS requests. You see, normal traffic is down here, but the ones that are infected are way up there. So you can also use a DNS server that provides security, like OpenDNS. OpenDNS runs free public servers you can use instead of your other DNS resolvers, and they keep a list of all the malicious domains, and they will not resolve them. So they will help prevent you from getting infected by blocking all the known bad IP addresses and help prevent your infected machines from phoning home. So it's a good thing. There was a Stormworm. This was a distributed command and control system using fast flux DNS. Just as DNS is used for all traffic on the internet, it's used for malicious traffic. And Microsoft intercepted a domain here from a court order. The problem is Microsoft has always been pretty ham-handed about security research, and they just barged in and took down servers without understanding what they were doing, and they took down servers that had actually already been taken down by other researchers they weren't coordinating with. But that's the way it is. However, it was very interesting. In 2012, Microsoft was able to get a court order giving them the legal right to take over criminals' command and control server, which is very interesting. And I still don't know how they got it, because the problem with taking over things on the internet is they don't live in any one country, and all the infected machines don't live in any one country. So how could any court have jurisdiction to authorize this action? And yet somehow they did it. All right. And then, of course, there's the issue that DNS exposes your network traffic to snooping. If you use normal UDP-based DNS queries, they can be picked up on your network. And if your network administrator records the DNS requests made to your DNS server, they know everything everybody is doing all the time. They know every query you send, so they know every site everybody's going to. So you can easily answer questions like, is somebody going to game sites or porn sites during the day or doing whatever I don't want them doing? You have a nice list there of what everybody's been doing and where they've been going. This is considered a very valuable way to monitor a network. All right, so the DNS requests and responses are not encrypted. There's no authentication, so it's easy to forge the response and trick you into believing you got a DNS result from somebody else. And if you're a caching server, you might cache the bad data and then serve it out to your clients for some period of time. I don't know, Chris. I don't think I covered that recently. It's the third time I've had it, but I think it was like 2 years ago when I had it before. I don't remember. Anyway, all right. So if your DNS goes out, then you have loss of revenue as people can't reach you. And of course, if your DNS service is modified and it lies to people, then the people that receive the false DNS entries might be sent to the bad sites where they get malware or they put their login information in fake sites and so on. And then, of course, there's cyber war. And taking down DNS is one of the many ways to take down sites, and Estonia is the main area. For some reason, Estonia switched to all electronic voting years ago, and they still swear by it and say it works, but they're under incredible constant attack by Russia, trying to mess with their voting systems. So they are the ground zero for learning about internet voting and how to protect it. All the experts in America say, don't use internet voting, we can't secure it well enough. In Estonia, they use it, but we are not using it here yet. All right. Let's try another Kahoot. All right, let's give it a shot. All right, so what technique makes it possible to put a DNS name on a portable device? Yep, that's dynamic DNS. All right, which one makes packet floods stronger? Distributed reflective denial of service. That's it. All right. All right. Which technology lets you have larger DNS traffic over UDP? That's extended DNS. All right, what measure blocks access to malicious servers? All right, Windows Firewall will not block anything. There is a Microsoft product that blocks some malicious sites, but not the firewall. OpenDNS is what does. All right. Okay, what part of the traffic is encrypted? None of it is encrypted. Now, DNSSEC is not going to encrypt any of it either. It's just going to cryptographically sign some of it. However, DNS over HTTPS, DOE, does encrypt the part near the client. But that's not in common use yet, although it's now becoming the default in some of the latest browser versions. All right, so what can you detect if you monitor DNS packets? Every domain used, not necessarily every web page. So if you look at, like my web page, if I go to here, samsclass.info/40, if you go around on this page and you click like the projects link here to see the projects, you go to a different part of the page. This does not require a new DNS request. The only thing that required a DNS request was finding samsclass.info. So I'll know you went there, but if you surf around on this page, I will not know that you've done any of that. Going to other things on the same server do not require a new DNS request. Now this one does. This is a different domain name, boundconsultingcontent.com. But most of these are on the same server, like this one, and that does not require another DNS request. It's another HTTP request, but it's not a fresh DNS request, not until you go to a different domain. All right, so you don't really know exactly everything they did on the web, but you do know every company they went to, so you get a general idea, are they playing games or are they working, that sort of thing. All right. All right, Jamie D. And floppy disk, again, another fake name, which is fine if you don't want your points. Not so good if you don't want your points. There's Kate. That might be unique enough for my grader to find you. All right. So I'm going to stop this recording.